Hello, everyone. Welcome to another series of life stories from Life Stories Worldwide, beginning a new year with a wonderful story this evening. It's good to have you with us, all our regular viewers and listeners, and all those who are joining us for the first time. We welcome you. We especially welcome those in Ukraine who are with us, and also those who are listening from Torch Trust. We welcome you to this Life Stories broadcast, where we share stories, life stories on social media, all types of stories of struggles, stories of challenges, pain, suffering, but also stories of tremendous joy and happiness and fulfillment, all types of stories. You can find out more about us by joining us on our website, LifeStoriesWorldwide.com. There you'll find information that will help you. You can find an app that you can download from Apple or Android. There's also a Bible app that you can download for your own personal use. And if you want to know more, you can also phone us on +44 794 355 0287. These stories can be viewed time and time again on our YouTube channel. We encourage you to subscribe and encourage your friends to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I wish you all a very happy and blessed new year. May it be a wonderful year for all of you. So tonight we have a wonderful story coming to you from Cornwall in the UK. Arthur White, he was a world champion powerlifter, a successful businessman, but then his life spiraled out of control. And he's going to share with you just what happened in his life. Hand over to you now, Arthur. Great to have you with us.
Good evening. Good evening, Alan, and thank you. Thank you for asking me. It's great to be here, and it's great to share with people. One of the things I've loved doing over the years is sharing what Jesus Christ has done in my life. But before I do continue, I want to say this. I don't want to boast about anything about myself. I want to boast truly in what Jesus Christ has done in my life. So there's three sides to my story, really. There was a time in my life when, materialistically speaking, I had everything that you would want in life. I had a successful family. I had a successful business. And as you heard from Alan, I was a world champion powerlifter. I had a successful sporting career. So materialistically speaking, I had everything that you would want in life. However, I was never, ever content. I always wanted more work, bigger projects, more money. I wanted more world titles. I wanted more world records, even in my family. I wanted more and more and more. Nothing seemed to satisfy me. Now, having a drive and having passion and having ambition is a good thing. But having no contentment is a hard thing. So I had, as I said, everything that you would want. Now, I'll take you back to my childhood. You can tell from my delicate tones, I wasn't educated at Cambridge. My roots originally come out the East End of London. I was brought up on a council estate in Essex, one of 4 children. I come from an ordinary working class family. There were certainly no luxuries and no privileges in my house. And certainly going back to my childhood, we never had things like Zooms, mobile phones, central heating, motor cars, or anything at all like that. I'm a little bit of a dinosaur in lots of places and in lots of ways. However, as a child, although things were hard and tough for my parents, they both worked, life was good for me. Now, I met my wife when I was 14. We got engaged at 17 and we got married at 19. And my wife, Jackie, and I have been together now for coming up to 52 years. I've got 2 grown children. I've got a daughter of 45 now, a son of 42. I've got 3 grandchildren, and I now live in Cornwall. I've lived in Cornwall 17 years. I live next door to my daughter, and I've seen my grandchildren almost every day since they were born. And my grandson, my son's son, lives very close as well down here in Cornwall. So I moved down here 17 years ago. And I love being here, and I still travel around sharing my story. I had, as I said, a successful marriage. a happy marriage, a lovely family. I had a successful business. Now, when I left school, I was an apprentice. I served an apprentice as a carpenter. And when I finished that apprenticeship back in the late 60s, early 70s, I started to work for myself. There was a boom in the building industry in and around southeast England and London. And I built a business off the back of that boom, and a successful business. I had money, a big house in Essex. I had a villa in Spain. I had a lovely Jaguar car. I had a few quid in the bank, and I was doing pretty good from a kid off of a council estate. And as I say, my sport was powerlifting. As a kid, I did sport at school. I played football. I did athletics. I played cricket. I played basketball. I just loved sport. And as a young man, I went into a gym. I started training when I was about 14, 15 years of age. And then I found out, just by chance, I was fairly strong. I started to train in bigger gymnasiums. And I remember as a young man seeing this colossal bodybuilder coming into our gym. His name was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is now a famous movie star. And Arnold Schwarzenegger was also Mr. Universe and Mr. Olympia. And I thought, that's what I want to be like. So I started training very, very seriously with weights. Rather than going into bodybuilding, I went into powerlifting because, as I say, I became fairly strong. And as a powerlifter, I competed for 30 years. 27 years, I competed for Great Britain. During that 27-year international career, I won 9 British titles. I won 6 European titles. And I was also 4 times world champion. I won the open title twice. I went into the over 40s and I won the over 40s. I went into the over 50s and I won that as well. And I seriously contemplated the over 60s. However, my wife started to point out to me that I was writing checks that my body could no longer cash. And at the age of 56, I retired.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all. And when he comes, we'll crown him Lord of all.
As the undefeated British, European and World Masters champion. However, I did consider coming back in the over 70s, but recently I've been advised by the medical profession that perhaps it's time I hang up my lifting boots and my lifting belt. I still train, I still enjoy exercise, and I'm pleased in one way that I've now put that to one side. But as I say, in my sport, I was never content. I wanted to lift more weights. I wanted to break more weight records. I would say that I actually became addicted to training. And I think if you speak to many top athletes, they will say in some way that they've become addicted to their sport. They love the train. I loved going into the gym. I loved training. I loved the weights on my back. I loved the banter with the other guys. It was a massive part of my life. I would even go as far as to say that powerlifting became my God. Everything and everyone took second place to it. As a fairly comical story, I shall tell you, my daughter was born on the 12th of June, 1977. It was the day of my first British Championships. I'd qualified for the British Championships in 76, and I was to compete in 1977. Now, my wife accompanied me to the British Championships. I was living in Essex then, and the British Championships was in Birmingham. It was only a fairly short drive up the motorway. And my wife came with me. She happened to be 8 months pregnant. Now, this was no problem, apparently. The doctor said it would be okay for her to travel. She wasn't going to be early. It was the first baby. So we went off to the British Championships and I was competing. Halfway through the championships, they called for the doctor. I thought perhaps it was one of the other guys got injured, but it wasn't. It was my wife. She went into labor. And at this particular time, no disrespect to ladies watching tonight, I thought that was pretty inconsiderate of her. However, we left the British Championships. We drove down the motorway coming home. My wife was complaining of the cramps she was getting and these contractions. I was complaining. I started to cramp quite badly as well. And we turned off the motorway halfway home. And within 5 minutes, my wife had the baby. And I don't exaggerate when I say this. She was a very fit and strong lady. She had the baby. There didn't seem to be too many complications. And I left her that evening. It was a Sunday evening. I went home, phoned all the in-laws. And the following morning, the in-laws turned up to speak to me, and they wanted to go and see my wife and the new baby, quite rightly so. And I'd forgotten what hospital she was in. Now, 45 years ago, we didn't have the internet like we have today. We never had the mobile phone systems and the computer systems that the NHS have got today. And it took 2 days for me to find my wife. So on the Tuesday evening, when I walked in to see her, you can imagine I wasn't the most popular of men. And it wasn't that I didn't love my wife and I didn't love my new baby daughter. It was just that powerlifting, my weightlifting, occupied so much of my mind. That was my God. Everyone and everything took second place to it. I probably was also, looking back then, thinking about where I stood in my life, I probably didn't give much thought to God or anything about God. I was a strong, independent East Ender. I was brought up to stand on my own feet. I was brought up to work hard. And from my hard work, I became successful. And as I say, with all that, so I had a lot of pride. As I was a strong, independent man. But that could have been and probably was part of my downfall. As I said, everything and everyone took second place to it. I wanted to be in the gym more than I actually wanted to be on site. Up to this point in my life, though, I was a relatively young man. Now, I've never smoked in my life. I've drunk very little. I was competing and training all the time, so to drink was of no benefit. Smoking was of no benefit to an athlete, and certainly never took drugs. Up to this point in my life, I was beating the Americans and the Eastern Europeans and the Russians, and I took a lot of pride in that. But powerlifting started to take over my life, and I wanted to train every day, and you can't. It's impossible. You need to rest. Any athlete will tell you that. You recuperate when you rest. And I wanted to train and train and train. And also fatigue was setting in. I'm working hard. I'm running a business, working 6-7 days a week sometimes. I'm running a family or trying to run a family. And fatigue was setting in. And you didn't have the supplements we have today, the energy drinks, such like. And I started taking just a little bit of ephedrine. Ephedrine led me into sulf. Sulf led me into cocaine. I became a cocaine addict. And I also then started to dabble very seriously into anabolic steroids. Anabolic steroids, as many people know in sporting terms, are called performance enhancing drugs. Now, they don't make you a better athlete. They help the body recuperate so you can train and exercise more. So I've now found a way of being in the gym more and more and more. I've now also found a way of just staying a little bit sharper in my head. I thought I could control my drug addiction. It was now controlling me. I actually lost control. My drug addiction took over my life. I was putting cocaine in my coffee, on my cornflakes, up my nose. A young man will produce 30 or 40 milligrams of testosterone a day, steroids. I was taking synthetically up to 1,000 milligrams a day. My heart was racing like a Formula One car. My mind was always on the go. I was never resting, and there were times when I never slept either. One of the big side effects of steroids and any addiction is that it changes your psychological outlook on life. And I started to see life differently. I started to see my own life differently. And I still thought I could control it, but it was now controlling me. I had an adulterous affair, deserted my wife, deserted my children. I lost my business, my homes, my cars, my money. In 4 years of madness, I lost everything that I'd ever worked for. I started to work then as a nightclub doorman. I started to run an illegal debt collecting business. I used to carry with me a 12-inch diver's knife strapped to my arm. I used to carry a 38 Beretta in my pocket, 2 knuckle dusters in my other pocket. I'd have 2 club hammers under my seat of my car and a pickaxe handle in the boot. I was now living a violent life fueled by drugs. But as I continue, remember where I come from. I'm just a kid off of a council estate who loved life.
He's coming. Jesus is
Life Stories.
Who loved his own life. And I'm now living a violent life fueled by drugs. Everything I'd ever worked for, I lost. But remember, I was once a husband, a father, a businessman, a sportsman, a respected man. And I had self-respect, and I'd lost everything. During one of my sane moments, and there weren't many, I went to see a guy. I went to see this guy for some counseling. I wanted to get my life back in order. This guy happened to be a Christian. Now, I knew nothing about Christianity. I knew nothing about God. Probably then, I would have been a God hater. Like many people today, I would have said, well, if there is a God in this world, what's he doing for me? Many people will say that today. What's he doing in the Ukraine where there's war? What's he doing in India where there's floods? What's he doing in Africa where there's famines? What's he doing in England in politics at the moment? How crazy that is. I would have said then, if there's a God, what's he doing for me? I'm a drug addict. I've lost my family, my business, everything I'd ever worked for. Look at me. I couldn't see God doing anything for me. But this counselor, this Christian man, he didn't patronize me or talk down to me. He certainly didn't insult my intelligence. He just sat and listened. But he said this to me. He said, you need to choose. And let me tell you this, ladies and gentlemen. That particular time of my life, I couldn't even choose what shirt to put on in the morning. My mind was smashed and mashed. I couldn't think straight. There were days that I never slept. I was fighting every day to stay alive. I was making a lot of enemies. You don't live that sort of life without making enemies, certainly in the East End of London. But I had some serious choices to make. And it doesn't matter where we are in life, whether you're young or you're an old granddad like me, whether you're rich, poor, black, white, wherever you come from, we've got choices. Some of them are serious ones, some of them not so. And there's a consequence also for your actions in life. The consequences of my foolish actions were that my life was close to ending. And I'm not being melodramatic when I say this to you. My drug addiction led me into bouts of depression. And we talk a lot today. You hear a lot of talk on the news and in the newspapers about mental health issues. I had everything going on up here. I had some massive issues. My drug addiction led me into bouts of depression. That bouts of depression led me into suicide attempts. I tried to take my own life on a number of occasions. I tried to cut my own throat, crash the car, overdose and drown myself. I wanted my life to end because I could see no way out of it. I was in a pit. I was in such a dark place. I could see no way out. I wanted it to end. In 1992, I competed in the World and the European Powerlifting Championships, the biggest competition of my life. I won the World Masters title. I won the European Masters title. I won the best lifter in Europe, the second best lifter in the world. I broke 16 British, European, Commonwealth and world records that day. And that night I tried to cut my own throat and end my life. I was in the best physical condition of my life and yet the worst mental condition of my life. I actually developed pains in my chest during the competitions. I just thought it was hypertension, and I went to see a doctor, and he said to me, if I continued with my drug addiction, I would die. He said, your heart is racing. If you continued, it won't last. It ballooned to the size of a small football. I was making enemies, as I said to you before, and there were men in the East End that were going to take my life. And as I said before, in many bouts of depression, I did try to take my own life also. So when I say to you that my life was close to ending, I'm not being melodramatic. I could see no way out. For me, the only way out for me was death. And as I say, I was certainly going to kill myself if I continued down that road. And there were men that were going to take my life. I was a threat to a lot of people. They couldn't trust me. I couldn't choose what to do with my life. However, on a freezing cold March morning, in a car park in the East End of London, it was Spitalfields Fruit and Veg Market. Now, I was debt collecting down the market. It's a huge international wholesale fruit and vegetable market. Millions and millions of pounds every day go through this market, sometimes in cash, sometimes not. But there's millions of pounds being moved around. All legal. This is above board business. And I was debt collecting for a few people. And I'd been debt collecting this night. I started work probably about 10 o'clock at night. And I remember about 3 o'clock in the morning, standing in the car park. I had a singlet vest on, my knife, gun in my pocket. I'd been involved in a few altercations that night, and I'd seriously hurt 1 or 2 people. If I would have been picked up by the police that night, I would have done between 7 and 14 years in prison. I thought I was invincible, that no one could touch me. But I remember standing in the car park thinking to myself, what a mess my life was in. I remember looking down, I had a pair of trainers on, tracksuit bottoms, thinking, what a mess. What's gone wrong? What are you doing, Arthur? Now, as I said, I never went to church. I never thought of God. I only went to church for a wedding or a funeral. I thought Christian men were weak. Christian men were wimps even. This is the impression I had. You use religion, you use faith, you use God as a crutch. But I was in a very dark place.
He's coming. Jesus is coming. I can't wait to hear the trumpet call. He's coming. Jesus is coming. And when he comes, we'll crown